All right, well, first off, welcome everyone to the private perpetual swaps hackathon. This hackathon is sponsored by Shade Protocol, an array of private DeFi applications built on top of Secret Network. And this is also sponsored by Secret Labs, the core development team of the layer one that you'll be building on top of in this hackathon. This hackathon will be running from November 16th to December 16th. So you have a solid amount of time to put together proof of concept perpetual swaps. This will be the world's first perpetual swaps. No one has ever made this primitive with privacy that protects users. So talk about a really cool opportunity to really break new ground. The layer one that you're building on top of in this hackathon is called Secret Network. For anyone new to the Secret Network development community, we have something called Secret Smart Contracts. The layer one undergirding these smart contracts has a bunch of different nodes, and each node has something called a trusted execution environment in it, where essentially encrypted messages come into this secure enclave. There's a decryption that happens, and then a computation that updates the state, and then there's an output. So using this hardware level encryption across the entire network, the smart contracts are empowered to work with encrypted metadata, and that opens up a world of super powerful use cases tied to protecting decentralized finance. And before we go on, we established what the layer one is. We want to talk about why perpetual swaps. Like what is the importance of leverage, and kind of just a quick primer on that. So without leverage products, the world of finance is kind of difficult. If you want to get exposure to a commodity or a currency or a crypto asset, you have to fully buy the asset, and you're kind of stuck with 100% exposure and a corresponding amount of capital to match it. And so leverage products like perpetual swaps are really, really powerful because you can get way more exposure to something while having less collateral involved. And this financial expression is super powerful in currency markets. Imagine I'm holding the dollar as well as the euro, and I want to offset my risk of the relationship between these two currencies. There are trillions of dollars spent on derivatives every year to manage the relationship and the volatility between global currencies. Same with crypto. Maybe I want to offset my exposure to Bitcoin. Maybe I want to short Bitcoin while going long Ethereum. And this is all a part of financial expression that as real world assets are more and more pulled on chain, as commodities and as currencies come on chain, it's going to be important to have the tools to allow people to hedge and manage their risk within this permissionless global economy. And perpetual swaps are one of those tools. And just kind of once again, kind of visualize this example. Let's say you wanted, $10,000 of exposure to Bitcoin. You'd have to buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, and then if it goes up, you only get $1,000 of profit, right? Because you only have $10,000 worth of exposure. Whereas with leverage, if you buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, and then you put that up as collateral within a leverage situation, you're now actually exposed to $50,000 worth of Bitcoin while only actually having $10,000 worth of collateral. And this means that your profit is magnetized, and so is your exposure. On the flip side, if things go south, of course, you're going to lose more collateral and more money at a much faster rate. But leverage is interesting, and it's a very powerful tool. This is that example I was talking about earlier, where the reason where leverage really gets interesting is people hedging positions, going long one thing while going short another. And this is going to become an increasingly important part of the Web3 economy. So we've now, talked about leverage at a high level, why it's important, what it is. Now I want to talk about the problem. So, because leverage products, they already exist in crypto, right? Like the perpetual swaps already exist. So why private perpetual swaps? Something that is becoming increasingly common is that people are tracking the trading data of traders on chain. You could be going, $10 million short on Ethereum, and then maybe you're negative $5 million in the red. And the whole world is watching you to the point where articles are being posted about your bad trade or your good trade. And this is a super PvP environment. In traditional finance, you can perform a hedging strategy or a leverage strategy, and the whole world doesn't know about it. But in this weird Web3 world, we've accepted this lack of metadata protection, and it exposes all of us equally to a PvP environment where programmatic actors, where media can take advantage of all of your decisions being totally transparently available. And so this is why private perpetual swaps as a world first is such an interesting opportunity. You get to protect your trading strategies. Like, let's say you have a very intricate leverage based strategy in a totally transparent environment. People can copycat trade you. That thing that's giving you that 80-90% yield, your financial creativity can just be copied outright. With private perps, your trading strategy and creativity is in many ways protected. The second piece, of course, like I said before, is protecting your identity from being connected to a positive or negative P&L. Um, it's if I'm a trader, the embarrassment of a Twitter account getting tied to a trading position, getting tied to media articles. I mean, this is a reputational risk. It's entertainment meets transparency meets public shaming. It's such an odd world that we've accepted here. And so being able to protect individuals' identities and decisions within their leverage positions, super powerful. And then on like a functional level, the ability to protect your leverage position from being targeted by large players. If you're someone that's um, you know $5 million in the red, and there's enough large players that realize this, they could shift. They can intentionally move the market to push you more and more into the red to push you out of a position. Versus with private perpetual swaps, people wouldn't know that your individual position, where its liquidation price points are, what your negative P&L is. So it's we like to say privacy is fair, privacy is equitable. It doesn't care if you have $100 million on the platform or $1 on the platform. Cryptography offers the same protections versus transparent DeFi. That isn't the case. That isn't the case. It's it's the highest bidder. It's the person that can spend the most on gas to protect their own trades, or the average retail investor. They don't have that protections. They go on Uniswap, they make a trade, and they lose $500 to some minor extractable value situation because there's total transparency. And then of course, like, besides just the privacy features, the reason, of course, private perpetual swaps are so beautiful, and this is true for transparent perps too, is we are opening up a non-custodial, permissionless, globally accessible leverage platform that also protects your privacy. That is that is amazing. That sentence 15 years ago would have been nonsensical. If you said that sentence 15 years ago, you wouldn't even know it. How would that be possible? How could you? There's so many steps. We've advanced so far with infrastructure and crypto that we can say sentences like non-custodial, permissionless, globally accessible private leverage. What? So cool. So cool. So now we'll kind of go into like what a perpetual swap is compared to your other leverage options. So spot markets are what people are most familiar with, right? You buy the asset, and you're holding it. As long as you hold it, you have the exposure, and then when you sell it, you no longer have the exposure, right? And so spot markets are tough because there really isn't leverage there. You can't really short things, and it's a tough situation. You also have to custody the asset yourself. So perpetual swaps are really interesting because they inherit the property of, you can hold on to a perpetual swap forever as long as you can manage the funding rate of the position. You can hold on to a perpetual swap as long as you want, just like with the spot market. But perps also are a leverage position where you have underlying collateral and you get an outsized amount of exposure to a certain crypto asset. And the other beautiful part about perps is you don't actually need to custody the underlying assets, right? That's the beauty of derivatives is it's markets that are tracking underlying assets, but you don't actually have to hold those assets, right? So perps open up the doors to getting exposure to assets without having to hold them. And then of course, crypto has been able to make products where you can go long. MakerDAO is probably the first example of this, where you lock up ETH, you mint out DAI, you go buy more ETH, and you kind of perform a loop. Like creating products where you can go long they came pretty early on in the life cycle of decentralized finance, but the ability to short something easily, the kind of the flip side of that market demand for financial expression, that was a slower process. But now with perpetual swaps, you know, there's this whole relationship between long and shorts, and you can easily short an asset in a permissionless fast fashion for one of the first times in these last 2-3 years. And of course, just like a hypothetical long trade, so we're all familiar. You have your entry prices where you essentially lock up your collateral, you open up your position where you buy a certain amount of perpetual swap shares, and then later on, of course, there's your closing price. We're able to realize the upside of those profits. You have your liquidation prices, and you have like your bankruptcy price where your funding rate has completely wiped out your position. There's nothing left, and the underlying LPs have essentially taken all of your collateral because you made a bad trade. And I'm going to really encourage people to go to the documentation in the hackathon. Red has done a great job of linking 5 to 10 plus resources on perpetual swaps and how they function. But the logic is pretty simple. The shorts pay the longs when they're losing, and the longs pay the shorts when they're losing. And so there's this funding rate component that is constantly dynamically changing, and it's all kind of tracking this underlying asset that the perpetual swap market is being tied around. And that funding rate consists of an interest rate component and a premium component. The premium component is essentially a balancing act of like, if a bunch of people are long and you also want to go long, you're going to have to pay more, right? Or if a bunch of people are short and you also want to go short, you're going to have to pay more. So the premium component is kind of an encouragement and an arbitrage to kind of balance out how many people are going long on the perpetual swap product versus how many people are going short. And the interest rate component is the cost component that helps the perpetual price track the underlying asset. So, like I said, you're going to want to deep dive the docs on perps. I don't want to make this like a 40-minute session explaining all the different variables. We will be leaving that up to you guys to discover and explore. But fundamentally, there's longs, there's shorts, and they pay each other depending on how the underlying asset is doing in relation to the perpetual swap that they purchased. So the hackathon, already said, you have the opportunity to build the world's first private perpetual swap market. Additionally, you have the chance to join the Shade Protocol product family. There's $20,000 in rewards for the hackathon, split between first, second, and third. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be examining the code, of these top 3 projects, and we'll be approaching the teams to understand their desire to potentially take a follow-up grant. And that follow-up grant is for $50,000 to bring your product to mainnet underneath the Shade banner, working with the core team. You get exposure to developers with over 2 years of experience building secret smart contracts. It's an awesome team. So the chance to join the Shade family in a significant way, what a cool opportunity. I'll also say we'll be following up with everyone that places, because there's a chance that someone who's in first place maybe doesn't want to take the grant. So then maybe the second place team does, or maybe the third place team does. And we're also going to encourage participants, like if you want to launch your own perps product post hackathon on top of ShadeSwap with its own brand, with its own product line, like please do. We want as much decentralized finance activity on top of Secret Network as possible. And so we look forward to seeing this world of private perps really, really open up. Finally, I want to talk about this is the last slide before we open it up to any potential questions. I want to talk about the sustainability piece because outside of private perps just being an incredible product, there's also kind of a bigger problem in DeFi that doesn't get talked about as much. Um, and so this outlines what I consider sustainability. But the current unsustainable paradigm is you have these spot markets where you know hundreds and thousands of dollars of incentives are being chucked at liquidity providers. And for the protocol supporting these spot markets, these are not profitable pools. So essentially, the these spot markets are very, very cost inefficient for the protocol. They're spending more money to attract liquidity to the spot market than the amount of fees actually being generated from those spot markets. And what we're seeing is that people are building leverage products on top of these spot markets, and those leverage products are making a killing. They're making hundreds and thousands of dollars, millions and millions of dollars, and they're just tapping into the spot markets, but they're not actually spending money to kind of incentivize those spot markets. They're essentially they get all the nice money that comes from leverage products without having to chip in to support the incentivization of underlying spot markets. Granted, they're bringing volume, right? They are bringing volume to those spot markets, but at Shape Protocol, we fundamentally believe to create a sustainable spot market, it would be incredibly powerful if every single product that was building on top of that liquidity also subsidized and contributed back to those liquidity providers, not just in the form of volume, but actually giving a percentage of their fees back to that spot market, because the spot market is the engine that undergirds everything. And so for Shape Protocol, with perpetual swaps integrated into the family suite, as it generates a huge percentage of those fees, not only is it bringing volume to the spot market, but those fees would also be given back as liquidity providing incentives, such that the protocol can reach a point where it has positive P&L, where its income is greater than its expenses, which is of course is a massive turning point that everyone wants to achieve in DeFi. Everyone wants to get there. Everyone talks about it as a hypothetical. We believe we can get there within the next 6 months with the money market built on top of the spot market, with the perpetual swaps, with the staking derivatives, with all these different components. And so the private perps you'll be building are part of a broader Shade Protocol economic engine. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate you guys listening to the opening here and the opportunity. Absolutely, that's a great point. So a lot of times, and I've been in this space now a couple of years, so I've seen this pattern play out. You'll see a really brilliant developer come up with a really awesome product idea. They develop the product, they get it on testnet, they're ready to go to mainnet, and then they realize like, oh, like I need in order for this thing that I've poured all this energy and time into, like I need to go get a community. And so now the developers spinning up Twitter account, Telegram, they're having to like advertise and market themselves. And then things get really stressful because then it's like, wait, this community in order, it's decentralization, I need a token. So now I have to go figure out how to launch a token. And then wait a second. There's like extra legal risk tied to me launching a token. Um, and then there's pressure from this community. Okay, now I launched the token. Now there's all this pressure of like following through, maintaining a product into perpetuity. I have to manage a UI UX, and maybe I'm just like a smart contract dev, and now I have this front end stuff. I don't really like JavaScript. I'm a Rust maxi, and so there's like these, running your own project from scratch initially sounds like such a lucrative idea, but the deeper you get into it, the more you realize that's a lot of responsibility. And some people do that. Some people love it. And we always say hats off to those people. But at Shape Protocol, we like to, offer up what I consider a really interesting relationship where developers can just focus on what they know and love, which is the development, and you don't have to go and launch token. You don't have to go market to a community. And the best part is, you know that what you launch when it joins the Shade product suite is going to be used by thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So you get the satisfaction of knowing you've built something useful and people have used it. And then because you've received Shade from the grant, you're able to stake that Shade, and actually 100% of fees on the protocol, currently at least, go back to Shade stakers. So you get a cut of all the fees that are generated across the product that you added to the family suite. And not only that, you get a cut of all the other products that have already been built by the Shade Protocol core team, as well as the other grant recipients. So it's this really interesting, cohesive, unified incentive system, and we empower developers to do what they do best, which is develop.
My name's Austin. I'm one of the mentors, and I'm excited to work with you guys on this. We do have some pretty nice documentation for our existing swap smart contracts, which is what Red was referring to with Shade.js. So that'll be a good resource to understand how things currently work and how integration might look like there. So yeah, I'm really excited.